Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. And I wanted to also bring in my guest, James, into the podcast here. But before we do it, I wanted to also just quickly mention I really appreciate FeedSpot for highlighting Life Science Success as the top Life Science Success podcast as well. I also wanted to quickly mention just before we hop into the interview that I'm creating a new podcast and it's called Growth Revealed. It's going to focus on marketers and salespeople and the successful things that they're doing to grow companies as well. And so hopefully I will, get awarded an additional award here in the future for that podcast as well. So with that, let me bring in James Pick. James, you're going to have to help me with your last name one more time.
Sure.
Piacentino?
Yep. Just break into
There we
three
go.
parts. Piacentino. Yep. You
There we
got it.
go. Thank you so much. And he is the CEO of Thrive Genetics, a pioneering digital health startup focused on transforming addiction risk assessment through genetic and behavioral science. So, with that, welcome to the podcast. And my apologies for butchering your last name as a part of the start of this as well.
Well, thanks, Don. It takes practice, my friend. It's a, it's a lost art. It's all good.
Yeah, so maybe could you just start us off by telling us a little bit about, your background and what it was that led you to digital health and genetics and behavioral science?
Yeah, sure. I would say from my early 30s, I've been about 27 years in tech. So digital health has been a focus of mine since my first role I ever had. I started in life science software startups and helped build, design, sell early products to very, very large pharmaceutical companies. So always software in that space. And in those first two companies, both were exited based on some ideas that we built in terms of IP. Just using creativity. I always like to say, like, you have to have other interests in life that drive your quality of your work. And for me, that was music. I've been a musician since I was a little kid. Toured and played stages all over the country before I even started, in the business world. And that helps me now. It helps me get on a stage and do a keynote. It helps create software. It helps solve business problems, thinking, in very creative ways. So while digital health might be the buzzword that I use for this company, I've been pretty much doing that technology meets creativity angle since I was in my late 20s. So it's been a while. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like you were at SAP as well earlier in your career, correct?
So that was somewhere in the middle. Yeah, my startup. I always tell people I did about 10 years in startups and about 10 years or so and more in corporate, and now I'm about 5 years back in the saddle, startup here, um, building out companies again. So yeah, this SAP thing, I could take that in a lot of different angles. But what was interesting there was I brought my startup experience into SAP, and they were like, "Oh, this is an interesting angle of creativity and taking and building things." So helped invent a product at SAP, got on the price list, and was doing quite well for as long as I know. And I let go of the baby and moved on, but yeah, did some time there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I think it's important as well to highlight those sort of the larger corporate experience as well, because I mean, I feel like to go from startup to SAP and then SAP back to startup again is like one of those things where you got to be going, okay, so it was great to have, all the capabilities, I guess, of SAP around you, but at the same time, having the velocity of a startup and some of the freedoms that come as well as an entrepreneur have to also be beneficial.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, and the reason I say that is I heard this in my head the other day, and you're extracting it. I had an executive at Google one time. He said to me, he said, I forgot I was interviewing for a role or something. And I said, yeah, startup is just like corporate. And he said, oh, no, it's not at all. And I said, well, for me, it is, because if you bring a mindset of what I call idea, action, impact, and you see, in a triangle. This is trademarked, by the way. That concept allows you to break down walls and barriers in even big organizations. That idea, what happens between idea to action is that it gets shot down because people say, "Oh, you can't do that here," or so and so is going to get upset, or and what I said it was, well, I'll work around that because I can create metrics that show you how this is going to impact the company and the value. And my boss's boss, if you will, right? And actually got me a role working for the CEO of SAP directly within his team for about 3 years. I brought some crazy ideas into him, and sure enough, I moved from my director VP, I think I was at the time. I moved up to working in his office for at least 2.5 years, and that was really high prolific stuff like board level documents and fun stuff like that. I got to help him with. It was a long time ago, but yeah, I honestly took a lot from everything in my career: startup, startup success, and startup failure, corporate success, corporate failure, into what we're doing now, and it's all helped, all of it. I don't think I would be able to move this fast in what we're doing had I not done some of the corporate stuff.
Very good. And then what was it that prompted you to found Thrive Genetics?
So Thrive Genetics, I always say we started about 3 years ago on paper, but it started for me back when I was a kid. So in 1982, my father had been in a horrific car accident. He had some spinal surgeries and different things, and they sent him home with a handful of bottle of pills. And the surgeries, were persistent over time. And he had become addicted to, I think, the pain medication he was taking. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was pretty strong. And from there, he developed alcoholism, and he had passed away right not long after. So it was kind of like one of those things where it's like, well, he may not have had an addiction before he went into this. So how many people? It's just kind of rolling around in my head. So how many people have had this problem? And I started really doing a lot of research on addiction and how does it, happen, right? So for my sake, was it genetic? For my kids' sake, is this something I'm passing along to them? My grandfather had a gambling problem, his father, my father's father. So is this something we're passing along to each other? So that question always sat on my shoulder my whole life. It was just kind of like hanging around. And as I got into, to doing what I was just explaining to you, going through my career, I said, well, I really need to do something I think that's more impactful, more even more than making money for the startups I made money for and the corporate I made money for. How do I change the game? This is the problem that's been, an emotionally traumatic event for me my whole life. Having an alcoholic parent, I'm sure there's millions of people who are watching this or that have an understanding of this. It impacts the whole family throughout the generations. So it's not just the alcoholic or the addict. That's the one person. But then if you're in a family of four, a family of five, it propagates to generation. It becomes a traumatic generational event. And that's where I said, wow, I think I could impact billions of people if I can figure out how we can get in front of addiction. I'm not saying I'm going to cure addiction, but how do you get in front of it, right?
Mm.
How do you stop that train from rolling through the station generation to generation? So I started to research it, and I found out like 65% of most people walking around today have a form of addiction, not diagnosed addiction. Like the NIH says you have addiction, or your hospital says 1 in 4 people have an addiction, but literally just societal people walking around. Once I saw that statistic, and 1 in 4 people are addicts, about 10% of the population, or 1 in 5, 10% of the population, I thought this is a big enough thing to go after and figure out with my tech background how to break into this. So I researched a bunch of scientists around the country from different prestigious universities, trying to find the science, like who's figured this out. And no one really had it. People had pieces of it. And then I saw Dr. Danielle Dick at Rutgers University Addiction Research Center had identified the genes and the behaviors of addiction. She put it into an algorithm, and she had some science behind it, some clinical, 10 years of clinical work. $40 million or something in NIH studies and clinical data behind it that Rutgers had done in space, I believe. Don't quote me on that exactly, but it's pretty close. And that work was exclusively licensed by my company, Thrive Genetics. That I built a company around that, partnered with Danielle, brought her on board as a co-founder, chief scientific officer, and we started to figure out, okay, now that we have a way to identify addiction, how are we going to do this? So we put it into a digital health platform that physicians can use to do genetic and behavioral tests to identify addiction in their patients before they prescribe pain medication for high pain procedures such as cancer procedures of the throat, head and neck, gastro, or spinal surgeries or spinal neuro procedures. So, or it could be applied to orthopedics too. But people break their leg; they don't necessarily need opioids. You could take Tylenol all the way through it and be fine. But when you have a high pain situation like cancer of the throat, the head, the neck, bone marrow, lung, gastro, or spinal surgery, you're going to need something to be able to be successful in that procedure, and you're probably going to have some form of a heavy pain narcotic that's addictive. So what we're able to do with our platform is identify the addiction risk in the patient before the provider puts a medication plan together for them. And then we have another proprietary AI software that's going to do some pain management. A bit proprietary, I can't go there yet, but it'll be able to identify pain patterns to help that story. So if you have a 3 month procedure, your procedure should be 3 months. It shouldn't be 5 or 6 months. If it goes 5 or 6 months, your mortality rate increases, and the hospital system incurs a multi-million dollars of costs. I can bore you with all those numbers another day, but it could be up to $100 million a system. So it's incredible if you can get in front of this problem, how many lives and families can be impacted and saved, as well as save the system a ton of cost. And this isn't cost like a hospital is going to lose money on beds. It's actually the opposite. It's actually going to create a better revenue stream for the system, because instead of readmissions that you're getting $1 for every 10, you're going to get $9 for every 10, because you put a new patient that needs help into the hospital, as opposed to holding that bed up for somebody who has a situation that's with a longer tail that should have been prevented in the first place. So our heart's in the right place, and Danielle and I, this is her life's work, and this is now my life's work. I've done everything I could possibly do in tech, from artificial intelligence to machine learning, before I even came here. So doing this really with the investors that are backing us, we have incredible advisors and investors that are all in on this. So we're excited and starting to have some success. So thanks for allowing us to talk through this.
Sure. Yeah, and it seems to me like I mean, I know of several unfortunate stories where somebody goes for surgery, they come out of surgery, then their pain sort of lingers over time. They have pain medicine maybe through that. I mean, one of the people that comes to mind through this story is I remember they got like a giant bottle of oxycodone. This is quite a few years ago, but at the same time, I remember just this massive bottle, and I remember telling this person, I was like, "Look, I know I know it's going to be tempting to start like really taking a lot of that, but at some point you're going to have to come back off of it as well. And so you just might want to think about the fact that if you moderate now and yet keep your pain like tolerable, then you'll have less to sort of fight. And I remember, later on the person that showed me the bottle, and they're like, yeah, I took not even a third of these pills through the entire time, because what you said just rang through to my head. And I also think about people that come through surgery and they don't have necessarily a positive outcome. So maybe there was some issue that continued after surgery that and it would be great to have some level of engagement from the healthcare providers to know that, like, hey, look, this pain is persistent, it's not being treated, and so the person's more likely than to have to take higher doses of pain relievers to get rid of the pain, and then who knows what happens to get them back off of it. To go back to your dad's story, I mean, it's really sad to hear then they move to self treatment because now I can't get the prescription meds anymore. I got to try other things.
Yeah. Well, you nailed so many things in there. And one of them that's the biggest kind of gap in care there is in this. When I say this, you're going to go, huh, this is going to be an eye opener. And I guarantee it. Everybody I say this to has an eye opening moment. This is a gap in care because we're guessing.
Mm,
That friend of yours is guessing, and the doctor who gave that
for
pill
sure.
bottle was guessing. And now you're telling me that you're going to guess on a narcotic that can create this problem, or guess that I should not take a lot. Maybe let's say your friend got a bottle of two and had a spinal surgery, and I don't want to guess what the surgery was, but let's say it was a spinal surgery that was extraordinarily painful, and they really needed 10, but they got two because maybe the doctor was scared or they were scared, right? Well, then the procedure can't effectively be done, and the rehab can't be done if you're writhing in pain.
Right.
So you needed more. Go back to the guessing. Well, we're guessing whether you have addiction risk or not. So really the value of this, and this is why I love what we're doing. It's easy, obviously, but why I love really what I'm doing every day is we're putting data in the hands of the physician and in the hands of the process to improve it. We're not saying do this, we're not saying do that, we're not saying take more, we're not saying take less. What we're saying is we're going to give you a data set that's clinically proven to use to your best judgment to support the comfort and the success of that procedure and the long-term health of that person. We're not saying you should take more, we're not saying you should take less. We're just giving you data, and it's a decision support tool for that. And our AI piece that's going to come in arrears of this is going to support that pain management process such that then you're getting real time updates from that patient as to really, if they are high risk and you didn't give them as much, maybe they do physically really need more, but maybe not more of that product, maybe more of something else. And it
Mm.
becomes more of a personalized medicine approach, which is really where we're going. So we're also, for the pharma folks out there in any pain area, we're starting to partner with many of them. We're starting to partner with some of the GLP-1s because there's an opportunity to partner and create an opportunity if, again, this is work we need to do within the industry. But if there's work to be done to create an opportunity where there's less craving for the product, depending on high risk or low risk patient, there's an opportunity to support this pain management journey with some of the GLP ones. So just we're conversations. Nothing is being done. There's no execution of this in the market currently, but there's conversations, and I think there's a real value and moat to what we have because it takes years of research to get genetic and behavioral data together to then create this, with the algorithm we have to create this addiction risk scoring system. So we're super proud of it, and getting out there now.
So you mentioned your relationship with Rutgers just a little bit ago, but also you have partners like Variants. How do these partnerships enhance or impact the power of your platform?
The super exciting partnerships that we have quite a few. So, in fact, I'm going into the health event in Vegas in the end of October. It's HLTH. I'm sure you know it, and many do. Last year we were there. We signed with NVIDIA Inception right after, and Microsoft for startups. So a lot of the AI technology that we're starting to work on is specifically around leveraging some of those tools. And I can't say enough about that, those products and those partnerships. It's been super to leverage what is being built and coming out of the large corporates. It's been nothing shy of amazing, and the costs. And I've been in tech for 27 years. The costs have come down. I mean, the compute cost is still not cheap for a startup, but the compute costs in general, all costs have come down. It's been an eye-opening opportunity for us right now, and this is also the other exciting part of it is I'm working with people I've worked with for years, and they're so smart. And now I'm like, look, I knew you were smart 20 something years ago, and now you've got these golden goose gloves and these tools that we can really knock the doors off this stuff. So it's like from a creative guy's perspective, I'm like throwing stuff all over, and they're like, "Yeah, we could do that." I'm like, "Oh, this is just great." So when you start to see what's available out there, it's like, give me a guitar with six strings on it, an amplifier that sounds good. It's the same feeling. It's like, wow, we can write any song we want, as long as we're doing it, intelligently and with the sake with the right purpose in mind. I don't think we're out here trying to push any agenda other than just to try and you know create the impact we're trying to create. But the technology is so open right now and so exciting. I can't emphasize that enough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I feel like this time is very exciting. I think from a healthcare perspective, having an understanding at all time of, like what is it that's happening to sort of, provide you the answer. That sort of level of transparency really helps. But at the same time, just seeing the speed at which we can do some of the things, I mean, it amazes me as well. Um, but it also ties to my next question, which is, how can combining genetics, behavior, and AI transform addiction risk management and specialty care? And then also, what challenges remain as well?
So I think the AI thing sits over here, right? And I'll explain that. The genetic and behavioral data and the algorithm that we use is nothing. This technology behind it's not. It's stuff that we've been using, in tech for 30, 40 years probably. Very basic stuff. Um, Genetics itself has come a long way, so we're just harnessing that wave. Really, it's fairly straightforward. When you identify the four clusters of genes for addiction, you take those behaviors and the proprietary nature of what we have in the back end. That gives us that side of it. The AI part is going to be more used in the pain management process. And what I think is important to note there, especially with AI, is I see, when I had this conversation yesterday, I see three levels of this, right? In healthcare, specifically healthcare, because I don't know too much about other industries. If you come out of the gate and you start trying to solve all problems with AI and you start shoving it in everyone's face and, oh, yeah, this is going to impact the patient right here, I think that's going to scare off humanity, right? Let's be honest. Even if it's right, the technology could actually be right and it could work. It might be 100% spot on. It might be doing things that are miracles, and but it doesn't matter because that level one, direct to the patient, is a massive human change management problem. Humanity's not ready for that yet. Healthcare is not ready for that, right? So if you come out and you're trying to solve the direct patient problem with this AI widget, and you're saying that you're going to go from point A to point B, you've got a lot of hair in that dog, right? So my statement about that is that might be a failed strategy or at least a stressful strategy. When you get to level 2 and level 3, it's a little bit more indirect. You're using that AI and that information to create a scenario. This is a level 3 to create a scenario that then creates a data output that is a support mechanism for the physician or for the patient to make, right? So essentially, what you're using it for is just I call it a saw, right? It's not the house, it's not the wood of the house, it's the saw, right? So you're creating something, and that is a quality product that's going to create something that's used to build the house. So it's a little bit downstream. And as long as obviously you have measurement in place and I would say support in place around that, it allows you to put together a much more confident picture. And then I would say I go back to the change management thing because I worked in the corporate thing. You remember you said you asked me the question about what is corporate doing for me now. What I learned is change management in a corporation is extraordinarily complicated. Society, we just learned from COVID, is clearly complicated. So why would we in healthcare all of a sudden be just so open to this? Oh yeah, give me anything, I'll take it. So it allows us to have like three gates in place to really look at how we use AI in that customer journey. And I think
Yeah.
that to me is the path we're taking. It's super safe. It's a bit conservative, but I can only go on what we know. I have great advisors. I have great tech people around me, and like I said, I've been on it 27 years. I'm confident as a team that we're not rushing things to market. Competition is there, yes, but why rush, right? If we can do it the right way and take our time, making sure that we're managing culture as well as managing technology. That's the approach that we choose to take, actually.
Yeah, adoption's a massive thing. No matter whether you're in a big company or you're dealing with, you know, the public at large. But also, I mean, I know that physicians are slow to adopt as well. Um, and for me, it kind of comes back to my next question, which is, how do you balance the scientific rigor and the practical business models to create measurable outcomes?
So I think scientific rigor is table stakes. So I mean, I can only speak from our experience. I mean, well, maybe I can speak more generally too, but I would imagine it's the same for everybody. You have to have the scientific rigor done before you start playing around with taking it to market and all that. So that's why having the 10 years of clinical work and all this money from the NIH and such behind the product before we even put it into the platform is kind of what I would call table stakes. It has to be proven. In the old days, you used to say computer system has to be validated. So um, that's kind of like a no go if that's not in place. And then once you get into market, that adoption that you're actually mentioning, the way I like to think about adoption is if I put a car in front of you, or actually, you can stick to the guitar analogy, it doesn't matter. And you'd look at the car. If I sat down and I spent all the time talking about the spark plugs and how they interact, or guitar, how the pickups work, and it goes into the pot and the wiring goes into the truss rod, whatever. You're like, huh, okay, but it's the output that we're looking for, right? So if you say to a physician, we can go from point A to point B, and it's a safe process, blah blah blah. IT may look at obviously the back end of whatever it is, and that's fine. That's normal. Um, but the point is what's the value? What's the
Mm.
value to the physician's experience? What's the value to the board's experience of that output? And that's a time on that, because if you don't, you're going to please the physician maybe, but not please the board, or you're going
Sure.
to please the board and not please the physician. And you have to obviously create value, and that's a very typical statement, but it's super important. That value has to be created at multiple levels. I think salespeople call it the ICP, the buyer matrix or something like this. But I think instinctively you should be figuring out that path right away, because otherwise you're just building technology for technology's sake in a vacuum, right? It's useless.
Sorry about that. Trying to deal
So,
with there was a sound on my side, so I was trying to mute that and caused it to switch there. So my apologies.
oh, okay. I didn't notice any noise. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. Part of doing a live show, so now it's there. So,
It's all
but
good.
yeah, I agree with you on the table stakes side of it. It's one of those things where, um, your ticket to play is being able to, you know making sure that it has a scientific rigor behind it. And then, the next step is, if you want to use tech or, other things to actually bring whatever it is to light, that's kind of the next, part of it, but it needs to prove the final result, in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Pulling all those pieces together um, it's almost like it's interesting. You're making me think about things, and I'm sort of spacing out a bit because I take for granted, the work that we did on that integration with my team. We have these calls and we go through it, and it's like we're just chugging through it, making sure we're getting it right, testing it. But it is a lot of work. to take the science, ensure it's in the platform properly. Then, like you said about the customer experience, like if it's a physician, is it an extra step in their process? Okay, maybe your pilot customer likes that, but maybe every other customer doesn't like that. But you better think about that up front. You know, if you have one customer that says, "Yeah, I love this. This is only adding one step to my process. I don't mind." He or she could be an outlier.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you're not just baking your entire story on, say, one step that one customer may or may not want to take. So there's so many nuances to that, and that's expensive to test. And in the way the markets are now, there's the markets, meaning the investment market. Some investment companies don't want to invest in early stage. They may call it early stage, but it's not right. It's where a few years ago, early stage, they would have, here's an idea. Okay, it sounds good. Let's put some money into it. But now it's much different conversation. So you have to have that work through. So we work with our physicians really closely up front. I actually enjoy it. I was talking about this last night. It's almost like the Curious George book when you're a kid. You're kind of like, well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And if you really aren't interested in it, like it's not. This is not for you, right? It's like
Right.
I picked up a guitar when I was a kid because I wasn't trying to be Eddie Van Halen. I didn't care about rock and roll. It was just interesting to go, well, why does it do that? Oh, why does it do that? And how do I go from here to there? And then after a while, you start to get momentum and you go, oh, well, then why is that like that? If you don't have that sort of thing buzzing in your head every day about what you're doing with your customer, it's going to be a brutal road. So I think that's so important. And I know you do a lot of work in this space in life sciences and go to market and marketing. So it's a big component for me to get my hands dirty. But I love that. To me, that's what gets me out of bed. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big part of this. Clayton Christensen's book, "The Innovator's Dilemma," just keeps like ringing in my head as well. There was an executive at GE that I remember, when one of my roles, he just said, "Look, you need to read this book, but you really need to understand what this book is saying, in terms of like that customer feedback loop. Yes, it's important, but also making sure that you have the scale behind it, and that the real results, in what you're asking, will pay, fruit as well. That you're not just like randomly asking a bunch of questions, without a purpose or direction behind it either."
Yeah. This is interesting. I love talking about this. I mean, you and I could talk about this over coffee or a drink anytime because it's, it's so interesting. So I went to Northwestern, I went to Kellogg, and the reason I went to Kellogg was there was a professor there. I'm not joking. I was looking at a bunch. His name is Robert Walcott, and he had a book, and I could turn around and grab it for you. Like I forgot the name of the book actually, but it was a strategy book about customer communication and how really build an innovation, how you build an innovation business and a product. And so Robert Walcott, check him out. Really interesting guy. Super super inspirational. It was like light went on for me. But I come back to what you see in the press about little things of Steve Jobs they drop, and you go, it's interesting how he thought about things, and it's interesting to study it because there's so many nuances to, like, to what you just said, and there's some basic principles that you have to execute on, and it's not always obvious. I talk to VCs all the time, and I love getting no's more than any. I said this yesterday too. I love getting no's because every time someone says no to something, or they don't believe in, or they say, "Oh, I don't like that. I don't understand that. It doesn't make sense." Or, "Why are you doing that? Do this." I love it because it gives me like this little like thing. I write it down, and I'm like, okay, let me go research this person's point of view on whatever it is. And a lot of times it's the business model, to be honest, but that's part of the innovative process and customer process. And I really work at it. I really work at it because I'm like, okay, this guy was pretty direct about believing that this is the better way,
Hmm.
and it might not be, but it might be, and I'm like, just the fact that it might be is like, well, okay, I'm gonna, I'm gonna work on that. he could be right. And I had a guy last week. He said something about a market, and I said, "All right, I'm listening. You know, I'm going to take that. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to work through it." And you take little sound bites from everybody in the innovative process and the customer journey. Um, and people will say things that don't make sense, and they're just trying to fill their calendar with meetings with startups to say they met with five this week and they disqualified five or something. I don't know. But it was really intriguing to me. Once I got over the hump of getting punched in the nose in the investor side, I took every punch in the nose like a gift. And I
Hmm.
really, really mean that. I like love it now. I'm like, I can't wait for somebody to tell me what's not right, because it just gives me some food for thought to pivot on, like it's always valuable. So the customer journey couldn't be more important, um, even to the investment community right now as we speak. It's just really important.
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's funny because I get asked a lot of times from people who are trying to start, start their organizations, and I sort of am like, have you had your first customer conversation? Because you, in my mind, you don't necessarily need marketing, you don't need a website, you don't need logo, you don't need really anything to go have that first customer conversation. And so the people that tell me that they want all of these things kind of in place before they actually get started, I'm like, look, in my mind, these are delay tactics. So, like, get out there and start
Uh,
having conversations, because the minute that you start getting some of the yeses, some of the maybes, and a lot of the nos, then you'll really know like how validated you are.
yeah,
And then like, can you get to that first paying customer? Can you put in place the minimum things that you need to get the first paying customer? And then can you grow that to 10 paying customers? And then, yeah, I mean, there's all these people that are like setting, they're trying to go from 0 to million. I'm like, just go make like whatever your first money is. Like, go make
yeah.
that first money, because that will validate kind of the initial thought. And then the question is like, are there more people like that, or are you validating this against an audience of one?
Right. I just read that somewhere. It was it like one is a, oh, I'm gonna hack this up. Like one is a, luck, two is a, a possibility, and three is a trend or something, four is
Mm.
real, whatever, that goes. But it is interesting too. Like our first customer that paid, um, it was like, okay, will this stick? And that was what kept me up at night. It's like, well, this could just be like this guy wanted to try something with genetics that's interesting, maybe. And then we really got into a deeper cadence with the hospital systems and some of the pharmaceutical companies that we can really drive some significant impacts. But it still is, as a startup, it's still a daily
Yeah.
practice to constantly just ask. And you don't, it's almost like you want to believe your own BS, right? You want to in the beginning. You really do. Because you're like, all right, I could sleep better tonight because I got this idea and I think it's right. And then what's worse is the feeling when you're wrong, right? So,
Yeah.
so you could say I want to be right, and that feeling is about, on a scale of 1 to 10, that right feeling is about a 6. But then when you get the you're wrong or the no, and it feels like an 8, you're like, "Ooh, I'm net -2." Like
Yeah.
I would rather just keep asking and getting my 6 up to a 10, as opposed to that feeling of, I'm wrong and being an 8. So it's like a self torture, but yeah, you've got to have so many inputs, and there's a lot, and every system is different. So when you're selling into pharma, there's different challenges.
Sure.
You sell to hospital systems, there's different challenges in the hospital system from one system to the next, whether they're an integrated provider who is a payvider versus a traditional system, big, small, political, university. There's a lot of nuances. So it's the most enjoyable part and probably the most time consuming part, to really get that going. But if it's not fun, then you shouldn't be doing it, right? I guess that's the way I look
Absolutely.
at it.
Yeah, because I mean, you gotta, being in that grind is something that is not something to think is minimal at all. It can be a challenge, and you're gonna have to love some aspects of it to just stick with it. My next question for you is, Could you share a leadership lesson that's been especially meaningful to you, or throughout your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah. So write this down, folks. There's an author. His name's Harry Kramer. Is a book called, well, actually, I have them right here. Well, this is one of them. I just happen to have it here. It's not my book. It's Harry's book, Values Based Legacy. Really interesting. So Harry is a tremendous leader. He was the former CEO of Baxter International, and he's a professor currently, and he works for a large PE firm too, I think. But his books are based on values, or focused on values based leadership. And I think right now, to me, that's my most, I would say, academic activity at the moment is really understanding and learning the DNA of that type of leader. I think there's a lot of shift in culture within CEOs right now, where you had the Jack Welch hustle culture. It sort of went into the '90s because obviously the tech was big in the '90s, and as the 2000s came around, you still saw hints of certain things, and as that progressed into the I guess the early 2020, 2019, 2018, you started to see a little bit of a shift. And it was like, well, are we doing well by doing good? Oh, that's interesting. You can actually do well by doing good for others. Well, I never thought of that before. So that sort of started to show its head in the mid 2000s. There were several books that came out and authors. So to me, the leadership lesson I kind of grabbed from that is, if you're focused on doing the right thing for solving a problem, and it could be selling Ticonderoga pencils because school students need it. It doesn't have to be you're curing a disease. If you're doing it for the right reasons to support the right things, and you're focused, and you're going to come out as a values based leader with success. So to me, that's where I'm kind of on the academic train at the moment.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's so important because I do think companies are going to come back to this balance of having to find, how do you continue to do both? And some of the things in social media that you frequently see is that people care about the broader whole person, not just the little tiny pieces that you see. And so I keep coming back to that as well, and it ties for me as well in what you just said. James, what is it that inspires you?
I get inspired a lot because if you start to really imagine what you can do with what we're given, like I grew up on food stamps. My family had addiction and from when I was a kid. I helped build and sell two startups. Went to corporate work for Bill McDermott at SAP. Started this company. I have tremendous advisors. We have great investors. You know, I am from the wrong side of the tracks, I think. And what inspires me is that every day there's just such tremendous opportunity to just get up and do it. And you might think I don't have enough money, or I'm not smart enough, I didn't go to the school, I didn't do this. And all those limiting beliefs, which is a buzzword now, so I'm sorry to throw buzz into this, but all those limiting beliefs really do hold you back. And you really don't need a lot of money to start a company today. I burned a lot of my own cash doing this. It was very expensive, but I think I'm an outlier. I don't think there's a lot of cost to build a business that means something to you if you really have a passion and a deep thing for it. And I think another thing I'll leave you with on the same thread is, be careful what you tell yourself about where you are in life and your age. A lot of people don't want to do certain things because they feel, oh, I'm too settled. My kids are in college, or I don't want to do it now. But if that little bird's on your shoulder chirping for years, you're gonna have to address it at some point. So really, the leadership lesson is that every day is a massive opportunity and every hour is lost if you're not capitalizing on it, especially with your energy. So we only have so much energy, right? Time is fixed, but energy is even more fixed. So be very careful how you manage that.
Yeah, also true. What concerns you?
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. There's a lot of concerns in the world now that are, I think, really amplified for me. I'm not sure if it's, I have to change my social media feeds or something, but I think there's a lot of complexity in the system, every system, whether it's the political system, the economic system. There's a lot of complexity, and I think the key is, like I said, to get up in the morning, focus on doing the right things, taking action on the idea that you have, surrounding yourself with the people that can help you take that action to an impact. Because there's a lot of complexity that can be distracting, and there's only so much you can do to help. A lot of us want to help, and the idea is, okay, where can you make that impactful, stamp? It doesn't have to be starting a company; it could be very small, but just taking that first step, because there's so many complexities out there that you can get really caught up in it, and it is a little concerning for me right now. I think in general, not just for me, I think for all of us. This is not we've not seen a lot of these things, but we've seen a lot of these things out there that are
Yeah,
going on right now. Yeah.
absolutely. Last question. What excites you?
Right now, um, I am in I am in a higher elevated resonant state due to the people that have come into my life in the last. I've had some great people in the last 3 years with the company, but in the last 6 to 12 weeks, there's been a really interesting group of people that have stepped up into what we're doing that I think are going to change the game for us, and we're going to change the world together. So my answer to that would be people. Right now, I'm really, really excited by the people we're working with.
Oh, very good. What a great note to end on. So, James Piacentino, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. It was great getting to talk to you about Thrive Genetics and all the work that you're doing there, but more broadly, getting to understand your story as well. So, thanks a lot for being on.
Oh, thanks, Don. It's a gift. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.